トビデオ
Before I start this video, let me make one thing crystal clear. I love Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, to hell with all your stuff about cringe or walking punchline or Sonic has had a rough couple of years nonsense. I just can't get enough of the blue blur. I've played the games, I've read the comics, I've watched both of the cartoon series and the anime series. Underground doesn't count.
Time to twirl and swirl!
I've jammed out to the soundtracks, I've made OCs in Jen's Furry Doll Maker, I've partook in many viewings of the Sonic short series, which really have not stood the test of time.
It's over 9,000!
And of course, I've seen the movie that, at the time of this recording, is still out in theaters and is #1 at the box office. It was decent.
Of course I want a latte. I love the way you make them!
I guess what I'm saying here is that I love that hedgehog. Sonic is such a fascinating franchise that I've bolted myself to. A franchise that's so permanently stuck in both 90s and early 2000s ideas of cool and yet has such a timeless quality to it that attempting to scrub away those elements would make it lose its luster. Plus, you can't deny the ballsy earnestness by which the Sonic franchise approaches its subject matter. Make all the self-effacing jokes you want in official Twitter, Sonic is always at its best when it's being stupidly awesome and playing it all dead straight. It's like Kingdom Hearts in that regard, only less nightmarishly convoluted. And since the live-action Sonic movie is doing quite well at the box office, I guess I am kind of obligated to talk about this anime. Oh, who am I kidding? I would have talked about it either way.
Finally, the only thing left to be done is to capture the essential life data from your counterpart. Then you will be complete, my hyper-metal Sonic. When you awaken, kill him!
Sonic the Hedgehog is a 2-episode OVA that was produced by Studio Pierrot and released in early 1996. However, it wasn't until the OVA episodes were spliced into one, released stateside, and given the immortal title of Sonic the Hedgehog the Movie in 1999, that the anime really achieved the notoriety it deserved. Sonic the Hedgehog is an odd gem in a franchise that's a veritable treasure chest full of them, and its perception from both inside and outside the Sonic fandom has shifted wildly over the years. I can honestly remember a time where people would consider this anime to be the worst piece of official Sonic media ever produced, and no one would ever dare debate such a sentiment. But that was back in the early 2000s, late 10s era of internet criticism, where not only hyperbolic statements such as those reigned supreme, but also the prevailing idea of the Sonic franchise was that it was not very good, and it never was. But even though we still see the Sonic franchise as a mixed bag of sorts, strong titles as well as people who have grown up with the non-Genesis titles entering the conversation has allowed for a vast reappraisal of the Hedgehog's body of work. And even if we were still doing the measurement of worst piece of official Sonic media ever, the Sonic OVA wouldn't even crack the top 10. In fact, the OVA might not even be considered bad at all. Maybe, perhaps, it's also kind of good. Really good, in fact. Okay, I wouldn't call it a masterpiece or even a flawed masterpiece, because it's definitely deeply flawed in more ways than one. But the Sonic OVA is good because it sets out to be a good Sonic anime, and ultimately achieves that goal. Now this does beg the following questions. What is a good Sonic anime? How does it achieve being a good Sonic anime? Do the anime's various flaws hinder it in any way? All of which are very good questions. But before we even get into answering those questions, we need to take a look at where exactly the Sonic franchise was at the time of the OVA's release. Sonic, and by extension Sega, were in an interesting place in the mid-90s. On one hand, Sonic was still a hot commodity on both sides of the map. The games were still moving systems, especially with the recent hit Sonic and Knuckles. The Archie comics were beginning to come into their own with a shift towards a more serious, serialized approach to storytelling. The cartoons were still running in syndication. There was even a hit song about Sonic on the UK charts by Right Said Fred because, yes.
He is a Mr. Wonder Man. He's a Mr. Wonder Man.
On the other hand, Sega the company was in a bit of a pickle. The Genesis was reaching its twilight years, and attempts to extend its lifespan through peripherals such as the Sega CD and the 32X produced mixed results at best.
And what's my payback? 1,000,000 pounds of tube steak.
Luckily, they already had a successor waiting in the wings in the form of the Sega Saturn. Having set the standard for 3D polygonal graphics a few years ago with Virtua Fighter, Sega was determined to pioneer a console powerful enough to emulate arcade games right in the comfort of one's own home. Polygonal graphics were the focal point of the industry, and all eyes were on the Sega Saturn, the Nintendo 64, and upstart Sony's brand new PlayStation console. While the Saturn did surprisingly well in Japan thanks to the memorable marketing campaign of Segata Sanshiro, in the United States, it did not fare well at all. Years of miscommunication between the American and Japanese offices had come to a head and resulted in a console release that almost seemed to be destined to fail. Things such as a surprise launch that game developers were completely unprepared for, poor third-party support, and just bizarre marketing.
But are you ready for the future?
Meant that the Saturn was pretty much guaranteed a last-place finish even before Nintendo's system hit the market. But the most damaging defect that befell on the beleaguered Saturn was that it had no mainline Sonic title, and it wasn't for lack of trying. Sega had spent most of the mid-90s trying to conjure from the aether a mainline Sonic game to sell on the Saturn, with Yuji Naka and the rest of the Sonic team devoting their time and resources to Naka's passion project Nights into Dreams. Sega had to look elsewhere. Attempts to make the first true 3D Sonic game with Sonic Extreme fell apart in the sea of technical delays and internal studio politics. By the time that game was officially cancelled in '97, the Saturn was dead in the water, and Sega was looking to the future with a new console called the Dreamcast. Determined not to make the same mistake again, they decided to focus all their energy in making the launch title for the Dreamcast a mainline Sonic game, which was due to be released on November 27, 1998 in Japan. So that's a 4-year gap without any mainline Sonic game at a time where the Hedgehog's star is burning the brightest. In order to keep Sonic's face on everyone's tongue, Sega devoted a lot of time and resources to spin-off titles. And this is where the anime came in. Knowing that Sonic Team is currently preoccupied with working on a non-Sonic game at the moment, Sega knew that commissioning an OVA title for their Golden Boy was a no-brainer solution to keep the public's eye focused on them. Even though this was around the era where big-budget OVAs were beginning to wind down, Sega was able to nab the proven experts of that type of OVA. Studio Pierrot. Even with a modest budget and a staff of mostly no-names, the director's only credits are this and an episode of Initial D, Pierrot put their best foot forward in trying to deliver an anime title that would do Sonic justice. But it wouldn't be until 1999 when AD Vision released a spliced version of the OVA under the title of Sonic the Hedgehog the Movie that it really became known to the wider populace. And this could be credited less to the anime's actual content and more to its release, which was on September 7th, 1999, 2 days before the Dreamcast and Sonic Adventure were released in America. In other words, perfect timing. Whoa! So now that we have an idea of why the Sonic anime exists, what about the anime itself? The plot of the Sonic OVA is actually quite straightforward. Sonic is tasked to rescue the president and his daughter Sarah, who have been taken hostage by Dr. Robotnik. According to Robotnik, he's only doing this because he needs Sonic to take down Metal Robotnik, who has taken over his city of Robotropolis and has sabotaged his generator to generate a world-ending explosion in less than a day. In exchange for the two hostages, Sonic has to go stop Metal Robotnik. Sonic begrudgingly agrees to do so and is able to beat Metal Robotnik with the help of Tails and Knuckles and a cowboy hat, but oh no! It was all a ruse so Robotnik can analyze Sonic's fighting style and transfer it to his new creation, Hyper Metal Sonic. And the rest of the OVA is just one long protracted duel between Sonic and Metal Sonic. Now the main problem with this OVA all have to do with the writing, but it has nothing to do with the main plot at large. People have complained that the plot of the Sonic OVA is too basic, but I think it works considering it's a 2-episode OVA and that doesn't leave a lot of room for a too complex plot. No, the writing problems of the Sonic OVA all stem from the elements surrounding the story, namely the setting. The Sonic franchise has always been nebulous with its overall setting, especially in the realm of adaptations where in the 90s Sega gave full carte blanche to comic book writers and cartoonists to create whatever world Sonic wanted to be in. It's why you had tonally opposite shows like Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic Sat AM running concurrently with one another. The anime takes this approach by creating an entirely original setting for Sonic similar to the games called Planet Freedom. And wait a minute, the problem is that this brand new setting is set up as if the audience is already familiar with it. Instead of doing organic world building like Sad AM or the comics, or even just ignoring the intricate details of the world and making it just a simple Saturday morning playground like Adventures did, the Sonic OVA just kind of throws you into this world with its own locations and rules and just kind of assumes that you know everything about it.
Planet Freedom is made up of 2 separate dimensions. The outer world, the one you live in, is known as the Land of the Sky.
Tell us something we don't know.
Shut up! Heed me! And the inner dimension is known as the Land of Darkness.
Characters are explained a little better. Even familiar characters are a little different than their video game counterparts, and unlike the world they habit, we get brought up to speed on their deal in a far more organic fashion. Knuckles in this world, for instance, is an Indiana Jones-style treasure hunter, the fact that's told organically to us in a simple throwaway line.
So are you going back to treasure hunting now?
Of course! Finding treasure is my absolute favorite pastime.
Which I guess explains the bitchin' cowboy hat that Sega really needs to bring back. It's a great design choice, seriously. But when you get to the completely new characters, then things get a little squirrely. Like the setting, these characters also get dropped into our laps, and the way they are handled could have been better. The President is basically a non-entity, either existing only as a living plot point to move the story forward, or be put into peril just to raise the stakes a little more. Old Man Owl is handled a little bit better, sort of a quirky, absent-minded professor archetype who, out of all the original characters, we have the best understanding of, probably because we spend a lot of time with him and get a good grasp of what his relationship between him and Sonic is, and also because he gets the most memorable moments.
Those are Sonic's favorite clothes, so don't blame me if he gets mad at you.
Don't worry about it. He was here last night. He forced me to put on these clothes and then flew away without saying anything.
And then there's Sarah.
Robotnik, don't you think I look cute?
Ooh, Sarah. Her role in the series is just to be a combination of the former 2 characters, a damsel in distress to raise the stakes, and a comic relief to provide humor. Her defining trait is that she is a spoiled teenage brat who can hold sway over even Robotnik.
Just give up! We've played 100 times!
I'll stop being your hostage.
Alright, start it again!
And that she also has an obsessive crush on Sonic.
You better keep your hands off my Sonic or I'll never forgive you!
Which completely comes out of nowhere, as if Sarah had been this longtime side character in the games and this is just one of her famous quirks that the audience will get. My theory is that her part was originally written for Amy Rose back when she was in her Rosie the Rascal design, but since Sega always seems to want to hook Sonic up with a human girlfriend, I guess they decided that tropey anime pseudo catgirl was the best option. And when I say tropey, I mean tropey. Then again, I guess it was there to make the B-plot of Robotnik trying to marry Sarah for poorly explained reasons come off as a little less weird, though not by much considering she's like 16. And of course there's the dub, which is its own little bag of tricks. Some actors are alright. Martin Burke and Edwin Neal do a serviceable performance as Sonic and Eggman respectively.
We don't have time to play little games with you. Get out of our way!
I, Dr. Robotnik, scientist extraordinaire, have finally completed my greatest invention ever. I call it the Hypermetal Sonic.
But then you have Knuckles, who just sounds a little off to me. Probably because I'm used to a deeper voice for Knuckles and not just Sonic with a twang.
Don't worry! I'll have you out of there in no time!
And of course, the most infamous performance of them all, Tails.
Bodyboard. The robot that looks exactly like Sonic! 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 Help me! Wake up, Sonic!
Shut up, Tails!
Quite a daring casting decision to cast a literal snot-nosed kid in the role.
Sonic, are you alright?
Get the Mucinex! But all of these complaints are small potatoes because the story really doesn't matter in this OVA. What matters is the action on screen. I don't know the exact details of the budget behind this OVA, but I bet it wasn't as extravagant as the OVAs a few years ago. Japan was in the middle of a recession, remember? But if this had an unassuming budget, you barely notice it. I don't get how anyone can call this a bad anime when the animation is this good. Not only do you have the smooth Sakuga that emphasizes the speed of movement of both Sonic and Tails, but the storyboarding and positioning is just perfect. The direction of every action scene knows how to make every part of it exude power and speed. Even when they have to resort to budget-saving measures such as having Sonic teleport dash everywhere, it doesn't distract from nearly every fight or chase scene having this almost Dragon Ball Z energy to it. It also does a great job in actually creating tension in how the scenes are choreographed. Sonic may be shown as an unstoppable force sometimes, but he's still shown to have his vulnerabilities, especially in his fights against Metal, which really sells the whole conquer yourself aspect to the fights.
You might know everything I'm going to do, but that's not going to help you since I know everything you're going to do. Strange, isn't it?
I think the main reason why they were able to do such great things animation-wise with this material is thanks to the streamlined classic designs of the Sonic characters. Sonic just being a collection of spheres and cylinders attached to one another in this anime just allows for so much versatility. But good animation and good direction aren't just what make the action in Sonic OVA good. What makes the Sonic OVA so good is that the entire staff knows how to translate the feel of the Sonic the Hedgehog games into animation. Take this shot. A side view of Sonic running fast, effortlessly spin dashing into badniks, heavy emphasis on not just the speed but also the acrobatic platforming. This type of action is the perfect way to adapt the feel of a Sonic video game to the language of anime. And even with the problems the anime has writing wise, they totally get Sonic as a character. Sonic always works best when he's portrayed as a punk who just happens to be on the side of good. And here he is at his punkiness.
Forget about it. You created that stupid contraption in the first place. Why should I have to go around cleaning up your messes?
I can't think of anything more charming than Sonic being the sassy-ass rogue he was born to be. He's a rebel at heart. What can you do? But what I really love is how the presentation of the anime is just so reflective of the tone of classic Sonic. Environments begin in tropical green areas and then move on to abandoned cities and twisted industrial parks like in the games. The entire anime has this fun, exciting roller coaster-esque tone to it. Even the anime soundtrack reflects a New Jack Swing / 90s house music style, and it's such a shame it never got an official release because these are actually some great tunes. And these elements are important because they help us explain the Sonic OVA's place in history, as well as why I think it's actually a good piece of Sonic media. Let's go back to the American release date for a moment. Releasing the anime just 2 days before the launch of Sega's brand new console and Sonic's big leap into 3D is the kind of timing money can't buy. People are anticipating quite possibly the biggest Sonic title in years after sitting quietly on the sidelines for most of the Saturn's lifetime. So what better way to get fans reacclimated to the fastest thing alive than with an anime that's advertised as a movie? A movie that, even with all its flaws, gets the appeal of Sonic as a character and as a franchise. But I think in order to really understand the appeal and importance of the Sonic OVA, one needs to take a few steps back and look at it from a historical standpoint. In hindsight, we kind of forgot just how Sonic Adventure forever changed the Sonic franchise, not just by simply taking the franchise into another polygonal dimension, but also in just general feel and tone. The classic Sonic was all about capturing that early 90s feeling of cool. The soundtracks drew inspiration from 4 on the Floor house beats and New Jack Swing style melodies. The colors were bright and vibrant, and even the environments reflected a very 90s school of design, utilizing geometrical shapes and low poly vectors to create a sort of factory Pomo style reality. But when Sonic Adventure rolls around, at the speed of sound, what is now cool has changed. The Dreamcast era of Sonic games reflect an ideal of cool that was prominent in the early 2000s. The Crush 40fication of the soundtracks resulted in the groovy house and New Jack Swing inspired tracks being replaced with rock and pop punk, edgy nu metal, and jazzy hip-hop. The environments trended a lot more to reality, but one that carried the Y2K aesthetics of techno-optimism and deep saturated neons. Even Sonic's actions are a product of the era, having his big entrance in Sonic Adventure 2 being him breaking out of a government helicopter, snapping a piece of metal off of it, and using it as an improvised snowboard to surf the city streets. The point is that the Sonic OVA is the last breath of the classic Sonic era in terms of presentation and aesthetic. This obviously wasn't intentional, and the classic Sonic aesthetic has been brought back in games such as Sonic Mania, but think about it. This OVA breathes 90s Sonic energy. The whole presentation of it is meant to bring the feel of a Sega Genesis title to the animation medium. To really emphasize my point, the whole crux of the OVA is Sonic fighting Metal Sonic, the antagonist that has come to define the classic era of the Sonic franchise in other media. What I am saying is that the reason why the Sonic OVA is good is because it's a good ribbon to tie on to that era of the Sonic franchise. It's a visual summation of everything the Sonic franchise was between 1991 and 98. A last hurrah to a look and feel that will be forever changed soon. Yes, it is very much a flawed piece of media, and yes, a lot of what I've said can be due to retrospect, but how can you say that this is the worst piece of official Sonic media? An anime that comes the closest to nailing the appeal of the classic Sonic era, both in terms of style and substance. Sonic doesn't always have to be a masterpiece to earn my acclaim. Sometimes, the franchise is at its best while it's playing to its strength, going fast and looking fun while doing it.
Sonic!